Dear visitor, it's my self-appointed duty to inform you of how precisely you're going to die. But don't panic. He's attracted to fear. You should have let your curiosity fade, should have driven by this abandoned hell house without a second glance. You should never have opened that front door or walked up those creaking steps. All of that considered, you still might have survived if the 2x4 nailed across the attic door had convinced you of the danger, but no. Like me, you had to know what lied beyond. Nothing of value, as you've discovered. In fact, quite the opposite. You've gambled and lost that which is most dear. You now read the words of a dead man. Perhaps I'm watching you read this letter right now, my soul trapped within this musty attic for eternity. You've nothing to fear of me, visitor. Although I might welcome the company, I'm not a man to wish ill on others. If your first experience in the attic was anything like mine, you might feel his presence now. Your eyes dart to the shadowy corners of the room, your heart beating like a war drum. I had felt the walls closing and expanding around me, almost as if the attic breathes like a cancerous lung, rasping and coughing. And you, not unlike a tumor that will never truly leave this place. I suppose I should explain myself. Allow me to tell you the story of a poor little boy that had once called this attic home. In the year 1921, Frederick and Mary Dean moved into this house. You might find it surprising to discover that this dwelling was once the envy of the neighborhood. I even found the chandelier that had once hung in the dining room, later sold by the Deans. They were in what newlyweds consider love. And soon after moving into the Dean house, Mary gave birth to their first, and to their disgust only, child. The baby was severely deformed. His eyes were unaligned, as if someone had tossed a pair of dice across his face and placed his unfocused and glazed eyes wherever they may land. His bottom lip hung down, exposing his gums, drool spilling out constantly. His entire head seemed to cave in on itself like a jack-o'-lantern mid-November. These conditions didn't improve with age. Mary took care of the boy, even pretended to love him at times, but deep down she despised the poor boy, blaming him for her difficult labor. Unable to conceive, the boy had robbed Mary of the only thing she truly wanted, to replace him. Frederick made no attempts to hide his disgust. He beat the boy regularly. At an early age, the boy was marched up the same attic stairs you just scaled, never to come down again. Mary never mentions giving the child a name. Frederick simply referred to the boy as Rat. Take a moment to study the room around you. Notice all the little nooks and crannies, all the places that even at noon are still never fully illuminated. These spots were where the boy would hide. On most nights, the boy would hear the skeleton key slide into the locked door. Candlelight would spill up into the attic. His father was coming to visit. Unfortunate that, unlike most children, light was what he learned to fear, not darkness. The boy clung to the shadows, scurrying like a rat from one place to the other. Eventually, he would run out of places, and Frederick would beat him harder for having made him work for it. Mary mentioned that she never heard the boy scream, just the lash of the belt echoing down the stairs. This is what the boy was raised on. A mother's love like a dying rose, dry and piercing, and his father's belt. I imagine it was difficult for him to decide which he liked least. I suppose you might think that it couldn't get much worse for the boy, but the Great Depression made things worse for everyone. The entire country was depleted and the Dean household was no different. Frederick was let go from his position at the bank, and the mortgage went unpaid for months. As their situation became more dire, Mary's daily visits to the boy, where she would leave a tray of oatmeal or leftovers from breakfast, became few and far between. Even Frederick found he hadn't the energy to chase the boy around at nights. One night, the boy heard the skeleton key slide in to the lock. Assuming the worst, he ran to hide, but soon afterwards he heard a hammer pounding as a wooden plate, not unlike the one you tore down yourself to get up here, was placed across the door. Unable to feed him, Frederick and Mary Dean allowed the boy to starve. Mary notes in her diary that she never heard the boy scream for food or pound on the door. She'd hear him scurry around up there sometimes, but of course, eventually that stopped. They thought their troubles were done, until one night, in a hurried hand, Mary wrote, "I hear him in the walls. Impossible. 2 weeks. He whispers to me. The boy has never spoken a word. I want to forget. Why won't he let me forget?" Soon after this, in March of 1938, the Deans moved from their house to Chicago. I couldn't find anything else about them that has survived. Even Mary's journal was burned to charred fragments when I found it. Frederick and Mary Dean might have forgotten their boy. Maybe they went on to live happy lives. Visitors to the attic, though, will never forget him. He will be the very last thing that you forget. I'm writing this letter on October 14th, 1987. This is my second and hopefully final visit to the attic. I thought it my duty to tell you what I've discovered of this forgotten boy and, perhaps vainly, to pass along my own story. I originally entered this attic precisely 20 years ago on October 14th, 1967. I grew up in the Dean house's shadow, just a few places down, and was always curious of what lay behind these walls. A friend had dared me to enter Dean House, and so I broke through the front door, scaled the steps to the second landing, and there, lying right in front of me at the end of the hall, was that old attic door. The wooden plank withering away. The skeleton key was still in the lock. I remember my friend had scared me half to death when he snuck up behind me. We entered that attic together. We found no bodies in the attic. Perhaps the Deans had taken precautions before fleeing to Chicago. My friend quickly became bored, but I was stricken with a fear that would never truly leave me. I had seen the forgotten boy. I saw his permanent, lopsided grin from the shadows. Glass-like eyes reflecting the light from the windows back at me. My friend hadn't seen him, but he would soon enough. He died in a car crash 12 years later. As you might have guessed, I've encountered the forgotten boy many times since our first introduction. You've probably concluded that there's nothing I can tell you that will spare your life. You're correct. You're as dead as I am. What I can tell you is what to expect. This way, you can live as long as you'd like, if you feel your haunted days are worth it. If you haven't seen the boy yet, you will soon. At first, you might spot him out of the corner of your eye, a flash of gray, rotting flesh in some dusty corner of your house or in your closet, or a grin from under your bed. A trick of the mind, you might say, and so you should. Tell yourself these experiences are nothing more than a nightmare for as long as you can possibly convince yourself. The boy feeds on fear, and he's always hungry. Everything up to this point could be dismissed, but what comes next cannot. I lived 20 years dismissing the forgotten boy, forgetting him myself by popping pills. He grew impatient. One night, as I laid in bed, I heard his bony heels tapping along the hardwood floor. I peeked, only for a moment, and there he was, crystal clear in the moonlight. His eyes were white and foggy, like hot breath on a cold window. His body was ravaged by starvation, his ribs and joints protruding through his thin, dead skin. Worst was that wicked grin on that misshapen gourd of a head. Close your eyes. It might buy you some time like it did me. Never stare. He doesn't like when people stare at him. As the fear within you grows, the boy will walk closer, soon leaning down right in your quivering face, his breath hot and moldy. Then in a little raspy voice, like breeze passing through tattered sails, he'll say, "I'm hungry." This has been happening every night for almost a year now. I've not once opened my eyes to the boy since that first night. I know what I'll see. The boy wants me so scared that I unwillingly surrender my life. Tonight, I plan to do this. I've been running for 20 years and I'm tired. Come to think of it, the boy is the only person who's ever stuck around. So I suppose I might as well keep him company in this attic. Now you know what to expect. Break the curse if you can. Remember though, when the fear rises within you like a flood, that the more you panic, the closer he'll come to your bedside tonight. Best of luck. Signed, An Unfortunate Soul. Not unlike our forgotten boy.